People, C. Charles 5079 on a silver Toyota Camry. And 305, we just pulled into 615 Elmwood. You owe me one more.
What you owe me? Why you following me, bro? I did nothing wrong.
Can I get your driver's license and insurance, please? You want to stay in the vehicle? Will you stay in the vehicle for me? You stay in the vehicle for me, you're going to be arrested for obstruction. Get back in the vehicle. Get back in the vehicle, you're going to be arrested for obstruction, ma'am. Get back in the vehicle, you're going to be arrested for obstruction. Get back in. Get back in the vehicle. Get back in the vehicle. Or all right, you're under arrest for obstruction. You're under arrest for obstruction. Get back. Okay, you're under arrest for obstruction.
Get your hands on me.
You're under arrest. Get on.
Hey, let me go.
You're under arrest for obstruction.
I'm not under. Let me test it.
305. Oops. 305. We're going South Park. Illinois. Stop! You're under arrest! You're adding charges, man! East Palm, towards Florida, on Elmwood, in the street. Male black, gray shirt, blue pants. 305, he's at Pleasure Court.
Yeah, come on. Don't touch me. Don't fucking touch me!
You're under arrest.
He's on the ground. We got two of us running up to help him.
Right now!
We got the guy that you guys are chasing on the phone. He's threatening to kill the officer.
Get your hands on your face. Stop fighting.
So where are you guys at? You're in custody. It'll take a few more though. We got a group for me.
Where's your money?
Hello? Bro, can y'all give me a sword down here? Your fucking officers are terrorizing me and my family. I just came to my friend's house. I just came to my fucking friend's house. He's following me, so I need that in the room. If I kill this female, that's what it is. I'm not playing with nobody no more. I'm sick of this fucking police
where you are. Where are you?
I'm in the room, bro. I just came to dinner with my family. And you're saying you all my mama will kill me.
Okay, I need an address or intersection, sir. Where are you?
I'm at 617 of my mother-in-law house, 615 of Redwood Drive. He's following me all the way to my friend's house, 618. And he's gonna pull me over. And I ain't gonna
pull you over.
The fucking, this is where I'm at, police officer. Y'all need to have some control, bro. out of hand. And he touching my sister, I'm gonna kill his dick.
Okay, no, you do not threaten a sister like that on the phone.
I ain't threatening shit, I'm on the phone with you. He touching my sister, I'm killing his ass. Sister, bitch. I need to let go of my sister, please. What up?
That's when the officers on the scene make contact with the male.
Hello, I'm Commander Jack Fichtel. I think this situation is one that the public must examine closely. A situation where the officer is addressing a traffic violation and the occupants immediately exit the vehicle and aggressively confront the officer. If the offenders of this incident are willing to behave this way with a law enforcement officer, how would they react and treat other members of the public? The Aurora Police Department is appreciative that the Kane County State's Attorney's Office, and specifically State's Attorney Jamie Mosser, also recognized this and sought charges to show that this type of violence towards a police officer has serious consequences. It cannot and will not be tolerated in our society. I'd like to introduce Chief Kristen Zeman.
This was a law enforcement officer doing what he swore an oath to do, to enforce the law. A minor infraction that likely would have resulted in a citation at most, turned into an officer fighting for his life. Our police officers are out there doing what is being asked of them every single day. And this is an excellent illustration of the criminal justice ecosystem in action. Our state's attorney and her staff exercise their role in thwarting this behavior. The message is clear and succinct from both the mayor, myself, and the state's attorney's office. S.A. Mosser and APD are in lockstep, and we are sending a collaborative message that these violent offenders and their acts of emboldened defiance will be met with harsh consequences. Thank you.
Strangulation is one of the most hands-on forms of violence. In my legal career, I've not only worked as a prosecutor in domestic violence, but also in the legal aid community where we saw an outstanding amount of cases that resulted in strangulation. Strangling someone, stopping their ability to breathe, even for a moment, is highly dangerous. And this is why in 2009, our Illinois legislature decided to make the crime of strangulation from a misdemeanor to a felony offense. Someone who is being strangled can lose their consciousness in a moment of seconds, and that means they're literally on the precipice of death at that point. What the defendants did on June 21st of 2021 was a choice to disobey the police officers. And then when they continued to fight with the officers, to resist being placed under arrest, and to place the officer in the position of not being able to breathe, that was attempted first-degree murder. It is fortunate for so many in that situation that backup officers arrived when they did, because otherwise we would be here to announce that there were murder charges against these three individuals. I would like to thank this officer as he continued to do his job and still does it to this very day despite this incident, and to the Aurora Police Department for their investigation, their professional and ethical investigation into this matter. Thank you.
Take up questions. State Attorney, you mentioned the two women's charges together and the driver separately. Besides the 911 call and the alleged threat that he made, is there any other difference, or is that the only difference?
That's the only difference.
And they were all three were originally charged, and now they're facing indictment. Can you explain the reasoning behind pursuing the indictment and upgrading the charges? How much more severe their potential prison time is?
Yes. So the original charges, the highest possible charge was aggravated battery to a police officer, which is a Class 3 felony or Class 2 felony, which means it's between 3 to 7 years, but also probationable. Because of the strangulation and because of the research that we know about how quickly it is for somebody to lose their life as a result of somebody preventing them from being able to breathe, we believe that the proper charge was attempted first-degree murder. That means it's a Class X felony. They're facing between 6 to 30 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections, and that is non-probationable. And again, it's because of the seriousness of the actions that they took that night towards Officer Miranda that we made the decision to bring this before the grand jury and secure these particular charges.
Chief Seaman, I had a question. Actually, two things. Number one, how is your officer?
He was treated and released from the hospital, and as S.A. Moser said, he's back to work, back on the streets, suiting up and doing the action and the noble actions of law enforcement.
And then number two, how was it that backup was sent? Was your officer alert enough or had the presence of mind quickly to alert dispatch, hey, I need help? Or was it that 911 call that the suspect made and they were like, oh my God, we need to get somebody out there?
He originally called out the traffic stop, so at that point, officers knew where he was. And when he said at the beginning, if you recall, when he approached the vehicle, he said, roll me another unit. So units were on the way, but then, of course, at that point, he wasn't able to call for assistance because his radio was taken from him, so officers were just generally going in that direction.
None of the videos we see the strangulation, so I guess you got notice of that because of the testimony of the officer?
Yeah, absolutely. The report filed, the report that the officer wrote, yes, absolutely, and the injuries sustained on his neck.
There's evidence
Yes.
of strangulation. Okay. Would you explain that? I mean, what's the extent of the evidence you have?
Well, there's evidence of the officer's injuries and, of course, the officer's statement, and as you see there on top of him, it's outlined in the report and through evidence, photographic evidence.
And because it still has to go to trial, we're not going to go into details about the specific pieces of evidence that we have right now.
What was the driver doing at that point in the video? Because we only see the two women purportedly on top of him, so what is the driver doing in that instant? Because he's lumped in with the other two suspects charged with attempted murder, so where does he fit into that?
So during the time period before the video had happened, while Officer Miranda is struggling with the two women, he actually is right by making statements and then starts to strike the officer himself. At some point, he does separate himself from that, and that's when the 911 call happens. But at that time, Officer Miranda is solely focused on the two individuals and trying to be able to gain some control so that he wasn't losing consciousness.
Is that just based off of testimony, or is that on video?
No, that's again based just off of testimony.
Chief, I had a question for you. You see right at the top of that video, I believe it's one of the two women who was in the car, has a phone out and is immediately recording what's going on. Obviously, we're still in a very charged time, and people are immediately going to their phones to record what's going on. When you see that, what goes through your mind and how your officer is responding, whether someone was right or wrong to how they were interacting with the officer and how the officer is interacting with them, that person clearly holding the phone up at least is projecting that they're concerned that something is going to develop. So what do you want to say to people who would see a video from that person's phone and be concerned about what that shows?
Well, exactly. I mean, you hit it.
Closer to the mic.
Sure. You hit the point perfectly, is that's precisely why we want body cams. We want squad car video footage. We want the footage from every angle we can possibly obtain it, because that's when you get the full picture. As for to what's going through an officer's mind, at that point, I doubt he had any consciousness of who was recording him. He's at that point trying to bring people into custody. But I will say, generally, our police officers know that is just the fact that they're always being recorded in some way, whether it's on their video cams, on body cams that we're soon getting, or if someone else is recording from that vantage point. But most definitely, it always is going to be better when we have more footage to piece it all together.
Is that video or photos from that phone, has that been reviewed by officers?
Yeah, that's evidence for the, yeah.
Okay, but in the light of his question, I mean, in this day and age where there's so much doubt of police activity, people, I mean, given the recent incidents,
Sure.
Have a fair doubt of what's going on. I mean, showing a video like this where it's mostly testimony, we couldn't see much of the things you're alleging happened. what do you think is going to be the reaction?
Well, sure, I understand what you're saying, but when you look at the totality of it, just look at the initial onset of the officer's interaction. May I see your driver's license, please? A traffic stop that most of us have all been subjected to a traffic stop at some point in our life. So you can.
Most of us are not black.
I understand. Yeah, no, I absolutely understand. But when you, and I would say that race, I don't know, you can argue that it plays a part. This is a Hispanic police officer, pulling over a vehicle for a traffic infraction. Once again, what we are charged to do as police officers, the very nature of the title is law enforcement. And so albeit a minor infraction, then you see just a simple traffic stop, and I say simple when it turns so complex. So I guess I would argue that the tone is set, and that should be a lot of context and evidence that you can apply towards and what the officer's vantage point was. And then when you see the video unfold and two people on top of him, that when you say, it's for me, that along with the officer's testimony, provides pretty good context, in my opinion. But again, this of course will be taken to a court, and a jury or a trial, and then that's part of this criminal justice ecosystem, right? The checks and balances.